Heyo, it's me, Lucky Bastard. And this is a build guide video for a sleep build that I call Sleepy Joe. It is utilizing some of the new DLC mechanics for sleep. A sleep build
can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him
Yes. Let's start with the stats. As everyone should know, Sleepy Joe is basically a dexterity build, with just enough strength to wield a great bow and enough intelligence to wield the hidden needle. I have equipped 3 spread crossbows for the purpose of not having to reload them after swapping. They are mostly used to put our opponent to sleep, and after sleeping we are using Tholier's hidden needle in order to profit off the sleep as much as possible. This weapon has a specific weapon art that deals even more damage if the target was asleep, and so it's kind of perfect for this build. In the Flask of Physic we have just a Dex Knot and Intelligence Knot tier to boost our damage a bit more. Get up and get dressed, Joe, it's time to talk about the armor. So we're wearing basically the entire Horn Scent set, which gives a ton of focus, so sleep resistance, so we're not countered by our own strat. And we're wearing the canonically soiled loincloth. Everyone knows how this happened. For Talismans we have Saint Trina's Smile, which boosts attack power if somebody sleeps in your proximity. We have the Shard of Alexander, the Arrow Sting Talisman to boost our main damage sources, which are the crossbow bolts, and obviously the Ash of War from the needle. And we also have the Great Jar Arsenal, just so we can carry all our crossbows without being overloaded. Or to be more specific, to have a light load. This is basically to compensate for us being pretty much a glass cannon. At least we get a lot of iframes from our rolls. So the strategy in general is rather simple. It's trying to get a 1v1 situation, if only for a short moment, sleeping the opponent with the crossbow, and then taking them out with the Ash of War of Tholier's hidden needle, boosted by the opponent being asleep, and also our talisman that gives us more damage from the sleep, and yeah, well, Alexander's Shard. This is not gonna be an extremely overpowered one-shot build though, so beware, a lot of people will take at least 2 hits from the hidden needle, or you might have to shoot them with the crossbow. That's why in the second slot I'm using Frost Bolts, because they have a lot of frost buildup as well and deal a lot of damage if your opponent is down to basically panic roll HP and you think you won't be able to land another hit on that. Although I must say that even though it has a very small range, the hidden needle shares a moveset with weapons like the Katar, so its running attacks are pretty neat for roll catching people, especially when they're panic rolling. And they can also be somewhat useful in a close combat scenario, although they're being outtraded damage-wise by almost every other weapon, and the sleep build-up also isn't enough to really sleep someone only with your hits in close combat. So it's basically just the last resort, or in case your opponent is almost dead. Like in case of this bull goat guy, I'm chasing him down and there you see this kind of double hand thrust Katar style running attack to take him out. This build really shines in 1v1 situations, because if you focus on only one opponent, there's almost no chance that they will outplay you, since using this crossbow to sleep someone is just extremely skillless and easy. And punishing a sleeping opponent is basically, yeah, well, the easiest thing you could probably do. They're just stuck for a while. All you need to do is time your L2, which also brings me to this point that the hidden needle is one of those weapons that will override your Ash of War if you have it in your offhand. So normally when you have any weapon in your right, so your main hand, you will have access to its Ash of War, first and foremost, unless your offhand weapon is a shield or a bow. Usually parry overrides the Ash of War, so you can parry with your shield if it's in the offhand. And if you have a bow in your offhand, you will most likely also use the bow Ash of War instead of your right hand weapon. So in short terms, it seems like this is a match made in heaven, the sleep crossbow and the offhand needle, although you could just switch the order around and have your crossbow in the offhand and the needle in the main hand. But it doesn't really matter in this case, because the needle overrides the weapon art slot anyway. The DLC also introduced a couple of new madness mechanics, and so there's a lot of madness builds you will encounter invading in the DLC. But it's also good to have a lot of focus, because it's not only sleep but also madness resistance to counter those builds. And as you see here, I can take quite a lot of madness build up before I would be madded, in theory. And they usually cannot take as much sleep build up, and this guy is just running. But there is again the running attack from the needle, which, as I said, is very good to chase people down. One weapon that no invasion build should go without is the Great Bow. It's still one of the most versatile invasion weapons or tools that you will find out there on any build. Maybe a single exception would be pure caster builds that have something like great fireballs or maybe a magic great bow or something, but everything else should have a great bow in the repertoire as well. In the beginning of the clip, I kinda lost a bit of my sniper honor to this guy rolling my shots, but I'm trying to gain it back here, and yeah, easy. Easy as cake. The best way to counter this build is definitely to pressure in groups, 2 versus 1 or 3 versus 1. Like, if you look at those guys, it's 3 guys, but they're way too spread apart, and one guy is shooting at me from afar. But this guy, because he's wearing the Rakshasa set for higher damage dealt, but also higher damage taken, he's one shot. And now you saw that there were 2 other guys, but they were just too far away. So keeping up the pressure is key against a build like this, because eventually I will run out of crossbow bolts. And if you have a build that does not heavily rely on FP, keep in mind you lose most of your FP if you're being slapped. But if your attacks don't rely on FP, like this guy with 2 ultra great swords, he's just doing jumping attacks and dealing tons of damage with them. And I sped this up here because this guy is actually gonna run me out of arrows, because he's also going to summon some hunters, and I have to be very defensive. So yeah, I will use this opportunity to talk about those crossbow bolts for a moment, those sleep bolts to be specific. Sleep bolts have a lot of sleep buildup, even more than the needles themselves. Technically, each one of those 10 bolts that you shoot with your crossbow at once has a buildup of 90. The buildup from the spread crossbow has just been nerfed with the patch that came out today at the time of recording, patch 1.13. But we will see how effective it still is, as I know from software it's probably still broken as heck. In turn, they buffed the base damage of the spread crossbow, so maybe we will just deal a bit less build-up, but in turn we deal more damage with the crossbow shots themselves. Okay, so right now I'm out of bolts pretty much. So what I'm doing in this kind of emergency situation is just running away for a moment until my crafting menu becomes unlocked. And then I can just craft 99 sleep bolts again. In order to craft sleep bolts, you will need the Fever's Cookbook 2, which can be bought from a nomadic merchant close to the main academy gate. Alternatively, you can just learn to take out your enemies without attacking them at all, like this. Look at him go. That was a top tier lucky bastard moment. But yeah, back to the bolts. Since you're shooting 10 bolts with one shot, that's an equivalent of 1 Trina's Lily per shot. Meaning if you plan to use this build a lot, you will need tons of those Trina's Lilies to craft your sleep bolts. So I would suggest only using this build if you have the means to either dupe those or have a save file with a full inventory of Trina's Lilies, or maybe if you're on PC you can use a mod or cheat engine to just refresh your inventory every now and then. These guys were kind of doing everything right there, pressuring me to be 1. But then I got a co-invader and the Phantom decided to head the other way, and the host stayed there to kind of ambush me. Which was a bad idea in hindsight. And funny enough, at the same time my teammate also took out their teammate. So GG partner. I thought AFK farming was dead and people had moved on and figured out that there are way more efficient and fun ways to gain some runes. And I guess I was wrong. Recently I found a couple of AFK farmers, and this guy's hiding on the platform, so my teammate could have just jumped down there, but I decided to take matters into my own hands and use a method that has been patched now with the current patch 1.13, so-called chainsaw glitch. This exploit will be very missed amongst the community. I'm sad. The DLC introduced so many weapons that are just unfun to play against. I mean, Exhibit A right here. I'm not saying that my build, the Sleepy Joe, is any fun to play against, or for that matter really a lot of fun to play with. I mean, it's fine, I guess, but I prefer builds that require some more skill. This is basically a build that requires planning. It requires having the right equipment, and once you get all components together, it just works. I mean, obviously you're not gonna win every fight if there are ganks or just 2v1s, 3v1s, people with backhand blades, but even those, if you don't use them correctly, I mean, hard to not use them correctly, except not using them at all. But well, backhand blades are probably the most cancerous new weapons, but they are in very good company in the DLC. They added a lot of really cancerous stuff. Stuff with pretty much infinite tracking, stuff that is, I mean, not undodgeable, but forces you to roll instead of strafing or dodging it any other way, which is not a problem in 1v1s, but it can be a big problem in 3v1s if all three of your opponents spam stuff that kind of forces you to roll. Sooner or later one of them will overlap in a way that makes it impossible to roll all the attacks. And well, I guess From Software just lost their sense of direction towards balanced PvP. In my opinion, Dark Souls 3 had a rather balanced PvP system. It only really got unbalanced when people discovered a lot of glitches like Estus cancel, animation cancels, and some kind of infinite combos that weren't really intended. But before that it was pretty balanced in my opinion, and Elden Ring is now well, very far from being balanced if you ask me. And it's not like the chainsaw glitch would make that better. I mean, if you look at this invasion right here, one of the major issues is also connection related imbalance. Like, look at this guy. He was already dead like 3 seconds before he really died, when he lost his dragon form. And then there is stuff like this. This is the next AFK farmer that I found. He's on this tiny ledge that is only accessible through a cave, the Gaol cave. You have to enter it from Khalid, and when you go all the way through it and defeat the boss, you end up on this small ledge. And he's basically impossible to hit without the chainsaw glitch. So well done FromSoft for taking away the only option to defeat those scumbag AFK farmers. I would have never imagined hearing myself advocating for the existence of a glitch in a Souls game, because I mean, I've played Souls PvP since Dark Souls 1 and I've never been a glitch abuser, but stuff like this, being stuck in your spawn point because FromSoft cannot make decent spawn points. You're just getting stuck in the map right at spawn. What the hell are you supposed to do if you spawn like this? There is only one singular option, which is using the phantom finger to teleport away. But what if you already used all your phantom fingers and the last one brings you to a spot like that and you're just stuck? You can just leave the world and, well, say thank you, Miyazaki. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that in a game that is kinda defined by its meme combat, which is nowhere near to being taken seriously as a combat game or fighting game, I feel like such things that require at least some skill to set them up, like the chainsaw glitch, if you don't use a macro that is, they kinda tied everything together, in my opinion. But well, for me it was kinda the king of the memes. I guess there's not a lot of people who share this opinion. And gladly there are also guys like these, like I just invaded people, it's 3 of them, and they are actually dueling me. I never expected this to happen, especially with this build. But they were 1v1ing. I mean, I guess they just found the grace up there, so they would resummon anyway. But still, that's some really nice guys. And unfortunately, I'm not playing with a nice build to have a fair fight against them. I'm just basically cheesing them with the sleep build. But hey, it's Sleepy Joe, that's what he does. I'm sorry. I don't really have a lot of options there. And now I ran out of bolts, and so I had to finish him off in close combat. And well, that's what I did. GG's, and thank you very, very much for not ganking. Sometimes if you meet people who are actually playing through the PvE and progressing through the game, it can get a bit unfair, because obviously if you put them to sleep, they're also very easy targets for the PvE, and well, the DLC has some very tough mobs. That's a pretty hard contrast to people who camp a Grace and fight you 3v1. At least this guy ran away, and so I had a fair 1v1 with him, in quotes, big air quotes, fair and balanced, as it can be, fighting against a moon veil. Just kidding. And then there's those guys, 2 colossal weapons against 1 Sleepy Joe. Who would win?
If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts I promise you, who's ever coming in is not going to... You don't need an AR-15. And in fact, you don't need 30 rounds to protect yourself. Buy a shotgun.
Easy peasy. Those guys look like it's their first day in the DLC. All this main game armor, main game weapons. So let's give them a nice welcome in the DLC. With some very welcoming DLC strategies. There we go. A warm welcome. Time to enter the arena of a 1v1 solo host Sweatlord, who immediately starts buffing as soon as he sees the message that someone invaded. And he knows what's up. He's trying to stay out of my range, running away from the crossbow. But eventually he will have to attack me in close combat, so that's what he's trying. And that's how much his buffs did for him. GG, my man.
What, what?
And with those final words of wisdom, Sleepy Joe is going back to his bed and he will stop terrorizing the poor people of Elden Ring. And I hope you all had fun watching. If so, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more Elden Ring and Dark Souls related content that I, Lucky Bastard, try to present with a funny and also a serious note, because I somewhat care about those games. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you next time.